Welcome to another Mick and Pat show. Things are happening. The Mick and Pat show. We're doing good. We got a lot of stuff out there now. We have, I would say now, past the point, my good man, Pat.
Mm-hmm.
The point of investment in which we got enough time poured in, enough episodes out, that I think we just shoot this thing to the moon. And we just do it for as long as we have any joy or pleasure in it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like now we're at the point, man, I don't even know what the number of the episode is. We're at the point now where we have enough content out that I'm struggling to keep up to listen to it for review during the week.
Mm-hmm.
And, not to say that we don't go over our stuff. We personally edit and make notes on our videos and on our recordings. But all that said, like, we've reached a point now where I feel like I call it the PNR, point of no return, man.
Yeah.
Too many hours in to just delete it and erase it and pretend like it never happened.
Yep. Just the sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
Working at play there. I agree. I've had fun doing this, and I think that regardless of who listens, who tunes in, I benefit from it personally, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, I think a big thing for me now is that I've started thinking about just how precious it is to me to have like the recordings of my grandparents right now. And like it'll be even more precious when I'm older and they're passed away. And like I just kind of think like I'm sure one day I'll be older and I'll think, Mick, you were such a young, immature man.
You died so young.
Pat was such a poor influence on you. But I'll look back on it and I'll be like, you know what? But my kids should know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if I look back and I'm embarrassed of who I am now, I think it might be helpful or healing to my kids to know their dad was just a dude, man.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And like their dad became a dude who was like wiser and less cool than he is now. I was like, I don't know if you guys are ready to listen to this shit. I'm not sure if I'm ready for you to listen to this shit.
Mm-hmm.
All I said though, feels good to be here with like our, I don't know, 8 listeners, maybe.
It varies.
Yeah.
We know who you are. We love you. But here's what I love about doing a podcast is because now I can tell people and I could like in conversation casually drop.
Are you now?
Like,
because you weren't for a long time.
I've been telling people.
You had the shiver me timbers.
I know. And here's why I still should or do. Because here's the best part of having a podcast. So when you're in a conversation with somebody, kind of like a vegan or a CrossFitter, you can just interject for no good reason into that conversation. Somehow mention that you have a podcast, that you're a podcaster, and watch them roll their eyes.
Yeah,
or
I've yet to have anyone roll their eyes.
They roll their eyes in their heart.
Probably.
And they just smile. Like kind of like when you hear, like when your friend tells you what they're going to name their kid, and you're like, oh, that's bad.
Yeah.
But then your face is like, oh, that's so cute.
We're going to name our completely white, raised in upper middle class suburbia daughter Milani. Well, not like there's anything wrong with the name Milani, but sometimes I think white people be crazy with the names they come up for their kids.
Oh yeah.
Like it's insane how many white kids nowadays who like don't come from any like unique background. They just come from a neighborhood full of other white kids. Have names like Fredello, Nilani.
And also, I used to have like 3 names that I would use in this instance to like make fun of kids' names too. they're like these super, like, also like on the flip side, like just like super white names, like modern white hipster names for kids, but I can't use them anymore because like
there's kids named that now.
Well, because I have like people I know who's like that's their kids' names, and I can't use that as the joke anymore.
Yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. Like, I just think about like, I'm gonna name my kid something that probably matches the environment I'm raising them in. Like, as shocking as that is, like
Remington.
FNX 45. If I call him FN or 45 as a nickname, but if I'm like FNX 45 tactical, get the down here. He knows he's in trouble.
That's like Elon Musk kids.
Yeah.
Aren't some of them named like numbers or
Ashx, Ashx 82 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, here's the thing. Like, I have a couple friends that I know who they're white kids, whiter than white could be, but they're from South Africa. And they have South African names that you're like, when you first meet them, you're like, what's this kid's name? And you're like, that seems like their parents weren't really self-aware. And then you meet them and you talk to them and you realize like, oh, you're from another place. Like you're from a different demographic, raised in a different community. Makes sense that your name matches that. But dude, sometimes like I just hear these names that some of these kids are getting and I'm just like, man, that is a whack raised in the cul-de-sac suburbia name.
My favorite one, that's a fake one, is from Night at the Museum 2.
Can't remember it.
Jonah Hill is a night security guard and Ben Stiller encounters him.
Yeah. And I can't remember the name though.
In the scene he goes, my name's Brundon.
Oh yeah.
And he goes, famous baby names, 1986, look it up.
Yeah. Dude, that makes me think of Hitchcock, Will Smith's movie, where like the bully kid's name is Astrid. Or like it's like pronounced like ass turd in the movie.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, that kid's gonna have a hard time when he's in college.
So like one thing I miss or wish, people used to like name their kids super intentionally, like with the meaning of what they're like, the meaning behind the name of like whatever your name meant, or like Native American culture. You'd be given a name, and then as you like grew up, you'd like sometimes if you like had like a exciting event in your life happen, or the moment you became a man, like you'd get a new name, or your family name actually meant something, or because it carried a long line of history and lineage. I kind of miss that.
Yeah, me too. I think like there was a time where names, I mean, yeah, of course there was a time, but like where names just had more weight to them. And I feel like nowadays, like a lot of names are just like, a lot of people just treat their name like it's just another word.
Yeah. Craig.
Yeah. I mean, like, even like, I don't know, like, I just think about like people who I knew with their name, they took pride in it. And they took pride of like what it meant. And like when it was said, you know, they took pride in like the connotation of what their name was. And nowadays I feel like people just don't care too much about their names, which is kind of a weird thing. I remember there was a video game I played made by the Army. It was like on the original Xbox console. And you got to pick your call sign name. And it was really cool because they incorporated it with each one, like each of these names. There was like 10 of them. Each one had like a little bit of dialogue that like the other like people in your squad would bring up and start calling you by it at a certain point in the level. And I remember I picked this one name just because like you don't know it until you play the game that there's going to be like this dialogue about it, and it's kind of cool because you get to, everyone starts calling you it, but like you're just kind of the green like rookie. People are just calling you rookie until like this moment where they're like, no man, this kid like I picked this name Bull Snake because it was like it's a badass name, Bull Snake. Yeah. And like, no, this kid's crazy. Don't you know the story? Like, no, in basic, we heard the story that he ate a bull snake. And like, yeah, Bull Snake, that's a good name. And like, then you're just called Bull Snake from the rest of the game. And I was like, that's badass, dude. I've never played a game that had that like weight on the name since then, you know?
This was coincidence, but in a World War II game I played, the main guy's name was Pat.
Oh.
And so you're like storming Normandy, and they're like, Pat, get up there.
Yeah.
It pumped me up.
Heck yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I remember do you remember the first time you found someone else with your name? Like your first and last name?
I guess first and last was probably just on like a Google search, you know, or whatever. Or like an Insta handle or whatever. But I've never like met somebody with my full name.
Dude, I remember this kid in middle school was like, hey, do you know this guy? Are you related to him? I was like, no. And he was like a writer for the Times. He had my exact name. And I was just like, what the hell? There's people with my name out there?
Yeah. In high school once, I was a freshman. And I was a sophomore, and there was a senior. We had the same name. And this kid comes up to me and is like, bro, I heard that you are fighting Tommy after school. And this like Tommy kid was huge, like a huge senior, like varsity wrestler, varsity football player. Like I haven't in my first pube yet, like basically. And this dude is like a fully developed man, you know? And I hear that like, he's like, yeah, dude, like he said he's fighting you after school. He's going to beat your ass. And I'm like, I've never even met Tommy. Like I know who he is because he's cool. Like he's one of those upperclassmen.
Yeah.
And then word started spreading around school. Then I had other kids coming up to me and they're like, dude, I heard you were going to fight him. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I am going to die to death. If like literally no contest. If I'm about to go fight this guy. Thank God. It was another senior with my same name who was supposed to fight this guy. And they fought and it was bloody. And there were some broken bones. But I was not involved in it. But all day long, I was pooping my pants because the word had gotten around and the rumors were spreading.
Yeah. That's fear, dude.
So
that's raw freshman fear.
Dude, I thought I was dead meat. Dead meat. Oh, yeah.
That's some like Dazed and Confused scene almost. You know what I mean? Like that could be like in just one of those like nice 70s high school movies.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I was kind of wanting to pick your brain about was there's this fellow who, for like the just like, you know, protecting his identity and what he does, gonna keep it nondescript, but he spoke recently at our church about how he works to get kids out of trafficking, especially in Asian countries, East Asian countries. And I was wondering, man, like, do you know more about that, or do you got like, I don't know, we could talk about thoughts on it and stuff like that, because he's a little bit like he gives me Liam Neeson vibes, dog. Like, from Taken, you know what I mean? Like, I know he travels a bunch. I know, you know, he's got his family here in the States, but he's often like gone overseas, like essentially like trying to get these kids out of child slavery and the sex trade. And I was wondering kind of your thoughts on that, because I just find it as such like a thing like that we hear about, not in our daily lives. It's mostly on the news or like read about it online. This guy's living it.
Yeah. So I think I do know something about this particular, organization, as well as like there's lots out there that do work in human trafficking and crazy other parts of the world. Like there's sexual exploitation, but aside from that, there's also like straight up like organ harvesting, black market stuff. Like if you need a kidney and you're rich as shit, you can, and like, or your kid needs a kidney and you're rich as shit and you need one, you can like basically get one from a street kid.
Good God.
And they'll go take that kid, get him off the street, harvest an organ, leave him to die, and then get that to you or your family member and have a doctor put it in you. That's horrific, as well as obviously sexual exploitation of children, of anybody, is horrible, especially children, young children. It gets worse and worse and worse. And it happens all around the world. It happens in America. What's crazy about sex trafficking is how much it actually follows big like events, like wherever the Super Bowl is going to be this year. Sex trafficking will have a spike in that city this year during that few weeks.
I mean, it makes sense, but you just never think about it.
Right. So like that sort of stuff, like, it's all around, and there's different forms of it too, like, the way you might always think of it would be like someone who's straight up like handcuffed in a closet, like forced into like sexual labor, all the way over to just like people who have found themselves in a very unfortunate situation as a sex worker working for somebody, and it kind of seems like it's on their own terms, but it's really not. Like, you could have a case of even like, let's say you have people who, there's women out there who have an OnlyFans account who, like, it seems like they're doing their own thing, like girl power, making money, but really like the guy they live with is like really kind of forces them into it. It might be a boyfriend, or just a guy like kind of forces them into it, because if they want to have a place to live, if they want to have a way to support themselves, they're going to have to exploit their body this way. Over into human trafficking, as well as into like laborers working in conditions where really they're actually more of an indentured servitude, pseudo slavery, to be a laborer working. That happens in this country as well as around the world. And so there's like a very wide spectrum to it. And usually we kind of think of like when you hear human trafficking, you think the Liam Neeson Taken type thing, just like, and that happens too. But there's like a very wide spectrum to what human trafficking is and what it looks like to be trafficked. And so with that also, the most like backstory, I was traveling in a foreign country once, and I used to I still do want to get involved with like aid for and work against human trafficking, but I was in a foreign country where there's a language barrier, and I was in a taxi ride with these two girls from this country, and we're talking, and like, so what do you want to do, like when you like, this was like middle of college, like, what do you want to do someday? I'm like, and basically the way that it came off was, it was like I said, what they heard was me say, I want to be a human trafficker.
Oh,
right. And so what I was trying to say was, I want to work in like human trafficking relief and work against it and like work with organizations to stop this. But what they heard was like, I want to be a human trafficker. And their eyes were kind of like big and like confused. And luckily there was a guy with me who understood like the language and culture better. And like, we worked that out.
Yeah.
But I was totally misunderstood in that instance. And I'd say in the past, and not that I don't still have these desires, but like in the past, it's really like appealing to the protector man side of me to be like, all right, I want to, go in by night with a couple other buddies and kick a door.
Yeah.
And like waste the bad guys and get all those kids out of there, you know. And that's actually the easiest part of it. To combat human trafficking, one of the easiest things you can go do is actually get people out of the situation. Not saying that you have to do, like, not saying that that's not something that we have to do, but just saying like that's kind of like the most appealing to, like, anytime you're like at a church service or at like at a group where you hear someone get up and talk about like human trafficking and working to fight against it. Lots of dudes think like, oh, we're going like black ops, like we're like, you know, we're gonna freaking like, you know, go do some crazy stuff like Liam Neeson. And really, like the hardest work in human trafficking is the post care and rehabilitation of these people. The trauma and abuse experienced, alongside with the fact that, so for some people, they have extreme trauma and extreme abuse to overcome. And then other people on the different side of the spectrum actually, like, this is their lifestyle that makes a living for them. And it's kind of what they know.
It's all they know.
And so they like don't necessarily have like a moral dilemma with it anymore, because they've lost themselves all the way in it. And so you get a lot of like, if you don't have a program to have love and care and rehabilitation and structure for these people, they will end up back in that same situation, or just back on the streets and unable to take care of or fend for themselves and have a vibrant life going forward. So while there are groups out there that do get people out of the situations, and you do have to get them out somehow.
Yeah.
The biggest work to be done is on that rehab side of things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the same argument of like, if you're going to be pro-life, you got to be pro raising that life. Right. Right. You know, like that's like the biggest thing that costs the most money and investment of time is like, okay, if you're out there and you're going to say, you know, abortion's bad and we should raise these babies, give these babies life, and you need to provide that. Right. And I think like with the human trafficking thing, the thing that like I was really thinking about from this guy who talked at our church was the way he was offered to help was to pose as a John and go in acting like he's looking for it. So that way they can really kind of get in, know who essentially the shot callers are, and kind of figure out like the insides of like, you know, where are the kids? Where are they being kept? You know, how does this operation work? So that way when we go in and try to get these kids out of here, we aren't having to risk these kids getting hurt, and we aren't having to risk like these kids being stolen away. And dude, I kind of personally want to ask you, Pat, like, if you were, you know, if you were to say like, yeah, I want to help out. Yeah, I want to stop this. And someone was like, all right, best way you can do it, we need a white guy to pose as a John. We need a white guy to go in there, flash some bucks, and really act it up that you're a pedophile. Do you think you could do it? You think you could, like, if that's what they said, like, I don't need you to have a gun, go in there kicking in doors. I need you to go in, knock on the door, and, like, fake it. Yeah. That's, and, like, to me, like, I was just like, I mean, that's a cold realization of how it works to find these people and stuff like that. And part of me is like, dude, I want to believe that I would do whatever I need to get these kids out. But the idea of putting myself in that mindset of like acting it, I don't know if I could. Yeah. Yeah. So lots of organizations, the way you do this is, one, you find rich looking American dudes. And so you get volunteers who are over the age of 35, white males who, are married. Yep.
And now there's a couple things involved with why you do this. From a believability standpoint, that's the demographic you're picking to go in there to do this, because this is the guys who are, and a lot of times, perpetrating these things. Right. Yeah. But at the same time, the age and the married part is actually also a way that these organizations can protect you. Because, one, just like sending a 18, 19-year-old kid into a brothel to get people out, and there's naked women throwing themselves at you, this whole thing, like, you know, honestly, there's a slippery slope there, and it's a slippery slope for any age of any person. But exposing, you know, basically a young man to this thing, can be very difficult. So it's like, you know, if you are older, have a wife, hopefully have some kids, hopefully even have a daughter, you're going to be in a lot better headspace to go in there and do the job and not let this shit also consume you. Now, you still are going to have to like deal with, like, I've talked to guys who've come back from these missions, and like had even guys who are trained, military guys, whatever, who come back from these sorts of things, who really have to decompress what they saw and like how they had to act. Because it is hard on you, but that's why you pick, you know, that age demographic and those people to go do the work. And you go in, lots of times you go in with surveillance, like straight up camera in your glasses, or like a camera and a lighter. And what you got to do is go into a place, have kids, like basically illicit sex from somebody. You go into like especially, let's take like specifically like Thailand, for instance, like a red light district in Thailand. Asian women, it's hard to tell the age of an Asian woman in a lot of cases. Like, it's just like that person could be 18 or 40, you know, like it's just, generally speaking, you know, just the way people age in that culture. So it's like, okay, you go into a red light district where they have all these strip clubs. Side note, they're typically ran by Russian mafia. So you're not dealing with some like necessarily local podunk people. You're dealing with some guys who are bad dudes. Dudes who are making
serious money.
Serious money, and seriously don't care about life.
Yeah.
And in a country that doesn't have a lot of law enforcement support. So you have a spot that you have some intel on that you think is running underage girls specifically. You go in there, find a girl who you think is young, basically take them to a back room, and on camera, like, get them to admit their age.
Yeah.
And you collect evidence, and then you go, lots of times you'll go to a law enforcement agency you're working with, typically not local law enforcement. You actually go to a state level, because as you get lower and lower into more specific regional law enforcement, you have more corruption.
Yeah.
You have more and more of that. And so you take that evidence to a state level of police or federal level of police, and then they conduct the raid to get people out of there. That's one method that can be used. And then you can go to other countries where it's like they don't have a lot of infrastructure at all, so you can straight up, like, I know a story of a guy who he heard that a couple villages away there was kids being held, so he spent all his money to buy a Vespa and spent the next couple days driving to the village and just walking in. And he would walk in past a guard and just take a kid out, put him on his scooter, and drive to the back. And he just did that for days, getting kids out.
Damn.
So, like, you can do it in all sorts of ways. And there's all sorts of different means by which you do it. But there are a lot of organizations out there trying to do this work. And some are doing it successfully, and some aren't. And some play different roles. Some play a role in actually getting the kids out of there. And then they partner up with, like, another organization that's specifically in the rehab part. Because that's an important part, too, where you want to really like doesn't do these kids much help to like just get them out and ship them to America and put them in a foster care like system. So you want to find local families, in my opinion. Like a lot of times you want to find like local Christian families who are wanting to adopt and take on kids. And usually those people aren't super wealthy, so these organizations will partner with them to help like fund the cost to take on children. But yeah, it's this thing that like you hear about it and you hear someone talk about it and you really want to like make a difference about it, and then you start to dive into it, and it's just really complex system to get somebody out, rehabilitate them, and reintegrate them into a normal life.
Smoke break.
Smoke break.
Hey, Ken, it's Mick, and I've got something important to talk about. We all hope we never find ourselves in a self-defense situation, but life's unpredictable. Enter the National Self-Protection Plan from Attorneys on Retainer, an actual credible law firm you can put on retainer for your self-defense needs. For just $35 a month, you get national coverage in all 50 states for criminal and civil legal representation in self-defense situations, complete with a 24/7, 365 toll-free emergency line. That's real legal support when you need it most. What's in the package? Bail bonds, scene cleanup, firearm replacement, even mental health counseling. Plus, 0 fees for a laundry list of defense-related costs like expert witnesses. So support the show and get yourself some peace of mind. Click the link in our show notes or visit our sponsors page to sign up for the National Self-Protection Plan from Attorneys on Retainer.
Hey folks, Pat here. If you're like Mick and I, you're a fan of classic tales like Lonesome Dove, Blood Meridian, The Three-Body Problem, and Steinbeck's East of Eden. With Audible, you can dive into these epic stories anytime, anywhere. Sign up for a free month, and your first audiobook is on the house. To start your free trial and support our show, click the link in the show notes or swing by the sponsors page on our website.
Want an awesome website for your podcast? Check out Podpage. We use it for the Mick and Pat show, and it's a game changer. Set it up in minutes, no coding needed. Support the show by using our link to get started. Your podcast deserves a home as great as ours. Podpage, the one-stop solution. Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever heard the story of the machine gun preacher?
Yeah.
Dude, that guy's a fucking wild ass cowboy, dude.
He's a pretty interesting guy.
Yeah.
I've listened to a couple interviews with him and stuff, and I like the Gerard Butler movie. I think it was enjoyable.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid too, I liked the idea of that. It's like, all right, there's child soldiers out there. Let's go freaking get some AKs, set up an orphanage, and
get them the hell out.
Fight them out of there.
Yeah.
And I think the machine gun preacher guy, I think he's like fairly genuine.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a crazy story of he was a kid on drugs, and like at the early age, like 13, like by 15, he was like on hard drugs every day and like selling drugs, making 10, 20 grand a pop, and like just a crazy wild became a biker, went to jail a little bit, went over to Africa and started. And basically when he came to faith, he ended up going on a mission trip to Africa and then just getting involved over there all the way to the point where Joseph Kony had a hit out on him.
Yeah.
And Joseph Kony's mom even tried to poison him, did poison him, and he just didn't die.
Yeah.
He attributes it to like a miracle.
Yeah.
That he didn't die. So yeah, like that sort of stuff excites me. Like I think that sounds dope.
It's just crazy. I mean, I know that solution isn't universal.
Right.
But when you see like the one time it works, you're just like, holy shit, this is wild as hell. Like the fact that this guy's over there and waging war on the people who see it as okay to put children on the front lines. It's just bonkers, man. All of it is crazy. I mean, I think like one of the things too that I think about with the guy who spoke at our church is like he's so clandestine about the operations and the security surrounding the operations. You know, like the actual how him and like his team is protected while they're doing this, and how they protect the kids once they get them out. Like, you know, part of me is just like, oh yeah, like it's probably not as badass as we all think it is. And it's probably, you know, he has to say that and allow it to be kind of in a cloud of mystery for whatever people think's going on. Because I mean, he's really transparent, and the organization's really transparent about where your money goes when you contribute. But when it comes down to like the actual operations and kind of the muscle behind it,
right?
Like they keep it quiet and close to chest for the sake of like people not being able to be aware of like how it works,
right?
And I think it's so badass, but like part of me just wants to get on the inside as bad as I can, just to like just to know the secrets and the ins and outs. And I mean, as you mentioned earlier, like the biggest thing that like makes me think like, man, I don't maybe I should just use the blessing of my American job and donate money to this cause, is that like I don't know how I would come back home and interact with like normal everyday American people when I've seen those things and seen the way children are being treated in some of these environments. Like I don't know how I do it.
I mean, that's what happened to the machine gun preacher, as far as like after seeing what he saw over there, his mind and heart was there. The rest, like he couldn't leave it.
Yeah.
He couldn't leave it alone.
Yeah. I mean, and to like the detriment though of like your relationships.
Yeah.
And
like that guy, he's not with his wife anymore. Like when he first started this, like he's not with that wife anymore.
Yeah.
Now he like has a new wife.
Yeah.
In Africa.
Yeah.
African lady.
It's crazy, man. Because I mean, I think about like my life here and just how that is not. It just would never lend itself to having so much time spent abroad, and like and like to doing that stuff. And like it's kind of like one of those things where like I think about it and I'm like, I either accept that the best way I can help and maintain relationships with my wife and my family here is thinning out my wallet and financially supporting them, or I accept that like going into that endeavor is going to cost me the financial stability I have now,
right,
to do that like full time. And it's just, I don't know, it's bonkers, man. It's crazy. It's sad. It's awful that exists. But I think like having someone like that we get to see and know, and like we see him regularly, I would say, is one of those things that's like, you have to accept that like it takes an incredibly unique person with very like specific drives and a very specific mentality to accept like this costs everything to be the person who's operating in this kind of mission. But like I said, I mean, I guess I just kind of want to meet the dudes who work in that industry as well, as like talk to them more, but also like pick the brains of like the people who have been there, kind of like in the like the dudes who pull security for that. Like you got to imagine it's dudes who are incredibly capable, especially like when they're in a foreign country with a organization that's like a charity, where like no way the government's giving you permission to carry firearms,
right?
And like, how do you maintain security? Like, are you operating essentially outside of the law? Like using like, sometimes I wonder, like, in order to provide the security needed, because there is so much criminal financial investment in these operations, do you have to partake in the criminal system and like get like illegal firearms? Do you have to get like, do you have to partake in like the black market of like acquiring weapons illegally and having them on your person illegally in foreign countries in order to just get these kids out of here safely.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, whatever criminal syndicate or organization knows they can't just come and, erase you.
Mm-hmm. I think lots of these groups operate in faith and don't pack.
You think so?
Yeah.
Even like the security dudes on it, like even the dudes who are like in country where they know like it's really up to them to just go in and get kids.
Yeah.
They don't got law enforcement backing.
I think lots of people do it lots of different ways, but I think lots of groups they don't, and even from a logistical standpoint or like a realistic standpoint of like if you're working some sort of in an undercover way to like maybe go in and pose as like a John, like you can't bring stuff in there with you.
Yeah.
Like in that sense. And so it's like, I think there are groups out there that do, and like there's probably certain like places that like protect orphanages and like with like security, then lots of people just walk in a form of faith that's like actually even more difficult.
Yeah.
Like it's up to their own savviness and wit and trust in God and what they're doing that it's gonna work. And like, so I think that there are elements out there that are like that do use force, but for the most part, there are lots of groups out there they don't.
Yeah.
And so it's if they do, they don't talk about it as much, but I think that a lot really genuinely don't. And it seems kind of harder.
Way harder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Scarier too, though.
Mm-hmm.
That's like another thing of like, put your money where your mouth is.
Mm-hmm.
You really want to help these kids, you don't get a gun.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get the group of guys with guns and expert training to back you up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's another level of commitment and risk there for like the everyday people who get involved in getting these kids out.
Oh yeah. And then kind of like a weird aspect to look at all these things too, it'd be like, and evil's always been here and it's not going away anytime soon, but like the pray for your enemy aspect of these things on like how do you maybe actually like, how would you actually end human trafficking? Well, is it to be like eliminate the need or the market for it, or the desire for like these nefarious things. And that's easier said than done, obviously, but like that's like, I feel like that's operating on a whole nother higher plane of thinking of how to combat really warfare for human souls all around. And don't get me wrong, some bad dudes got to die sometimes. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But at the same time, there is like a love your enemy, pray for your enemy is a command that like right up there with all the rest of them if you're like a believer. And so that's a lot harder to walk out than like if it was like, if the command was like freaking roast your enemy. Like, oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
We'll roast them.
Yeah, that's kind of the biggest contradiction among like warfare from a religious standpoint historically. Is like, you can honestly look at like the wars waged like historically, right? Like I'm talking like
Crusade
biblical
status
times,
and
stuff like that, right? You can look at like Jewish religion and they got a command to essentially do whatever they got to do to preserve the Jewish people. I'm not as familiar with the Quran, but I know the Quran is pretty much like cut and laid out in several spots of like essentially like, hey man, it's your duty to go and take war to not everybody, but to take war to those who mock, to take war to those who essentially like balk at Muhammad or Allah. And like Christianity though, like bro, like I always ask myself this question. I'm like, how do we go from Christ to Crusades? Because there's just nowhere in Christianity, in any of the epistles, those for those who don't know, the epistles are like the letters written to the church by the apostles and stuff. But nowhere in the New Testament does anything support waging war, going after and slaughtering your enemies. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I think there's plenty of verses throughout the whole Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, that say that justify self-defense. I don't think God desires his people to not defend themselves, outside of persecution for faith. But, I see the history of the Crusades, or other wars waged in Christianity, wars against native populations who are pagan or whatever, right? I'm just like, dude, what were these people on? Where, I mean, they only got away with it because the majority of the populace didn't have access to the Bible to really call them out and be like, there's nowhere here in the Bible that justifies what you claim is your God ordained right in Christianity.
Because at that point, lots of those things had become an oligarchy again, a government ran by and mixed totally and bastardized by government, politics, and religion together. And in the Quran, their parts of the Quran that do speak about peace, but there are parts of the Quran that are straight up basically the command is to go make people either they have two options. You go out and to unbelievers, and they either convert, or so there's three options. They convert, or they pay a tax. They can still be a Jew or a Christian. They pay a tax.
What's the word for the tax?
There's
a word that
it's I should know this.
Yeah, you should. Middle Eastern studies guy.
I know. I'm sorry. You can pay the tax, or
you can die.
And you can die.
Yeah. Which is as a Christian, I see that. I'm like, that's wrong. But if I was Muslim, that's a good reason to go wage war.
Right.
That's a good reason to go make war against the rest of the world who isn't believers.
And there's modern Muslims who would also be that would translate that differently now, and these sorts of things.
In no way am I saying all Muslims are warmongers, right? But it's just when I think about religions that have waged wars in history, Christianity is, and I say this as a Christian, Christianity,
they're up there on the worst.
Not just the worst, but they're also the one who has the least justification to do so.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep. And then even think about even more weird would be all this stuff in England and Ireland of Protestants and Catholics killing each other.
Yeah. Bro, great movie I watched. Awesome movie. I'd love to do a brews and reviews on it. It's called The Banshees of Inisherin.
I haven't seen it.
It's a metaphorical movie. And if you don't know what the metaphor is, it's kind of just silly and funny and then really sad. Just depressing almost. But if you understand the metaphor, it's directed by an Irish director. Cast is all Irish. And it's essentially talking about the lunacy of the Irish Civil War and essentially how it's still going on today.
Right.
And all the characters are metaphors for different populations of the Irish people, whether it's the people who sided with the IRA after the truce between Ireland and the UK, people who sided with the truce and was hey, we got peace now. We got a part of Ireland that's a country. And then you have just essentially everyone who's just the civilians, and different characters who make up the civilian population who's just too dumb to even understand what the hell anyone's point is in it. They're actually intellectually incapable of understanding the difference in the arguments of why the Civil War is existing. And they're dude, I just want to raise my animals. I just want to take them out to pasture, and I just want to be left alone. And then you have the more sophisticated who are represented by a character who are like, this is ridiculous. We got to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And they immigrate to other places of opportunity to escape the Civil War over something that they see makes no sense. And like, it was really well done. But I remember I watched it with my wife and my mother, and we were all laughing our asses off in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of it, we were all just so depressed. I had to look it up, be like, what the fuck was this movie about? And it like, once I learned that, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But it's a great movie. It's really well done.
What's it called?
Banshees of Inisherin. Yeah. I think there'll be a lot of Academy Awards this year for the actors and actresses in it. Yeah, it just came out beginning of this year.
Nice.
But all that said, I mean, it's to your point of like, you can't use Christianity. You can't use the Bible as to justify war.
Warfare in that sense. No. And especially like a expeditionary or a crusader type war, you know, it's one thing to like defend invaders. Yep. A different thing too. And then, like there's, throughout a lot of time, anytime like we see the banner of God get thrown up alongside some political banner,
danger.
It's a danger sign.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that goes almost though, like the banner of any religion. Because like I was reading statistics, and essentially like what communism did under the banner of atheism. I mean, it was more people killed underneath communism, and the idea of like all religion is bad, and atheism is the only way to have a utopian society of equality.
Right.
The amount of people murdered under that was more than like any other like war combined.
Oh yeah, it was like undeniable.
But I didn't know that actually. Like I legit did not know that. Like I knew like communism bad because people in Russian prisons, bad, right?
Like,
Gulag's bad.
Not having freedom is bad.
Yeah, but then dude, like I read stories of like Christians and Muslims and Jews and Buddhists all being just absolutely not just executed, but like flayed and tortured. And dude, I remember I was reading this one about in East Asia out of this book. Great book for anyone who wants to read like true stories of absolute atrocities that have happened in like modern day, like modern day martyrdom of the Christian faith. A lot of people think that doesn't happen nowadays, but like this book is called Jesus Freaks, written by good old DC Talk.
Really?
Yeah, DC Talk with Toby Mac and the gang. Back in the day, they just collected all these stories into a book of like martyrdom. And one of them was from East Asia. I can't remember the country. I want to say it was Laos, when they were trying their communist regime. They went and grabbed all the Christians in this town and roped them up together and laid them down on the pavement and rolled a steamroller over them. Just like this slow, long line of crunching them. And as they were dying, they were like singing worship songs. And it led some of the people there that day to like become believers. Yeah. Because they just saw these people like worshiping and praising in spite of their execution. Like not just like firing squad execution, right? Like, but like absolute heinous, torturous execution. It's got a lot of stories about like essentially Russian gulags under communism as well, of like people who were being tortured to reveal where the secret churches were. People who became believers in the gulag and then were tortured. I remember there's one guy, I can't remember his name, but essentially he was like this cutthroat, badass, like absolute bastard in this gulag. Like just, you didn't mess with him. He wouldn't think twice about killing you. He became a believer. He became a Christian. And they started torturing him to reveal what information he knew from whoever shared the gospel with him and stuff. and he's like, pretty much telling them no, and they're like, we're gonna cut out your eyes. He's like, you cut out my eyes, and then all I'll see is Christ, and I'll keep on praising him. So they cut out his eyes, like they literally cut him out while he was alive, and he was singing worship songs. They're like, we're gonna cut out your tongue. He's like, you cut out my tongue, but the rocks will cry out. And so they cut out his tongue, and then they like and he like bled to death, you know, from like the injuries. But I just remember reading that, dude, man, that rocked my world.
And that like goes back to some of that stuff, like, you know, talking about like the human trafficking, like getting people out of that. Like, I think lots of people really do it unarmed.
Yeah.
Like, that's like the goal isn't to wage war. It's to set people free. And like, personally, I don't know where I even fall on that as far as how I'd like to conduct something like that.
Yeah. But
yeah, the stories of people who live out their faith that way. And in America, we typically, it's pretty easy to live out your faith and your beliefs, and for the most part, you know.
Yeah.
So but yeah, that's some real persecution.
Dude, I'll be honest, like reading that book and like just knowing like that a lot of the success is done without violence and like doing the things Christ commands us to do, right? Like going and helping people is often done without the need for violence. I struggle with that the most, man. That's the biggest rock I stumble over when it comes to the idea of like living out my faith, is like the idea of honestly like seeing true malicious evil and not meeting it with violence is like the thing that I know it, like I am consciously aware that is like my human nature. And I know that there is a time to meet violence with violence. But majority of the time, biblically speaking, for the Christian, if you're not a Christian, hey man, meet violence with violence, whatever. Like, I'm not going to tell you to follow our rules, you know, if you don't believe in them. Makes no sense, right? But for me, I know like that's like where like my biggest hurdle is like the idea of like, if someone, you know, if today we became communist Russia and they just were going door to door and pulling Christians out at gunpoint and saying like, renounce your faith, you can become a very productive citizen of this society. Tell us where the church is and we'll even reward you with money, status. And that idea of like just saying no and just accepting death, accepting torture, accepting watching my wife get killed and tortured, or my friends like you and our church being executed. Dude, I can't, like, I know right now, like, I'm just not there. I know right now, even after all these years I've been a believer, like, I'm not there. And I won't pretend that I am. And I mean, what about you, man? Like, cause I mean, I know you and I are, we're very kindred for our kin out there. We're very kindred on some of these things, but I also know there are some things, man, that I feel like you're just more mature and like more, accepting. I want to say the word resigned to, but resigned sounds weak, you know? Yeah.
Like, I think that I've gone through a couple different iterations of these things, and it does change now that like I have a family.
Dude, can you imagine someone saying like, tell us where the church is, and then you're like, no, and then they're like, all right, well, we're going to torture your kid in front of you.
Right. And so there's that sort of like having a family. There's a burden of responsibility for protection of them. And there's some weird thing where you're like, well, you could just like trust and wait on the Lord. And
the Lord's like, I gave you an AR-15. What the hell you did?
Right. Just kidding. But yeah, it's like there's a valid point in that, you know, like this, like, so yeah, I wonder sometimes, where does my like Western American nature and like love for the 6-shooter toting cowboy butt right up against, and that with a sense of justice, butt up against also like a call to be a man of peace. And it's a weird line to walk, and even in like for instance, like I was talking to a buddy once, and we were talking about carrying a pistol, and I was like, even if I'm carrying up my pistol and someone like robs me of my wallet, they're armed, they got a knife out, whatever, by myself, I'm just gonna, as I told him, I was like, I'm just gonna hand him my wallet, let him walk away.
Yeah.
And he was like, he was so flabbergasted because he was like, oh, I'd shoot that guy. And I was like, well, for one, like, what's he going to do? Like, take a couple $100 in cash, maybe, driver's license, gift card, a punch card for Subway, and a freaking, like, credit card that I have, the insurance company will cover.
Yeah.
And nobody loses their life, including that guy. Like, that individual, that person. And so that was like the love for your enemy and that too. But at the same time, like someone posing a threat to someone innocent or a family member, it's like, I find some line between like, I'm resigned for myself. I don't feel a huge need to protect myself or like to protect my own livelihood. But when it comes to those around me or those I feel responsible for, that's like a different a different conundrum.
Same situation, but your wife and kid are with you.
I also give them the wallet, because in that case too, the best thing you can do to protect them is to do that. But you know, in any different instance too, where it's like just the.
What if the guy doesn't have his face covered? Like, what if he's just got his face out?
Right. I don't know. And
yeah,
if he's not posing a threat, like, and so like in that specific instance, you know, like to game out that instance we could, but like even like generally speaking, it's just if I feel the need to protect those around me strongly, but I kind of don't feel the need to protect myself that greatly. You know?
I know what you mean. Here's my thing. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
But then someone told me, like, okay, I just remember like in a training course I was doing, someone was like, that's fine. That is not a wrong answer. But what if that guy doesn't kill you, but the next person he does?
Right.
And the next person he does until he gets caught.
Right.
Because it's easier. He doesn't have to risk it. You know, whatever whatever his logic is, the bad guy logic. And I don't know, man. I've seen a lot of of where like people comply. They get a nice solid 38 special to the back of the dome for it.
Right.
And I'm just like, part of me is just coming to the point now where like, not that I'm faster, not that I think I'd always win, but part of me has just gotten to the point now where I'm like,
gotta at least try.
Like, I don't know that this guy's not going to, even if I comply, and I'm like, dude, I'll suck your please. Like, just don't hurt me.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't matter. Like, at the end of the day, like, I don't know. And it's weird because like I specifically got life insurance for this purpose, right? Like literally the idea of like, if I'm wrong, taking a right turn at a stoplight, I get plastered by a train, whatever. If I'm wrong in a robbery and I get wasted, if I'm wrong with how much cholesterol's in my daily diet and I have a heart attack on the toilet, like I have life insurance solely for the sake that like, if I'm wrong, my family's provided for. And this whole episode sponsored by Northwestern Mutual. Folks, check it out. I'm just kidding. It's not sponsored by Northwestern Mutual. Don't sue us. But like all that said, like I'm like at that point now where I'm just like, yeah, I'm all right. I'm at peace with my maker. I feel okay about dying and going to heaven. Look forward to it even. And I'm not worried about those who are left behind because I think they'll be okay financially.
Right.
But man, dude, I'd feel bad if I had the means to stop that guy, and I find out later that guy took someone else's life,
Right.
Ruined someone else's family who doesn't, who was entirely reliant on the individual he killed, and now they're just like a dismantled family with no means for covering it. And like all that is like, how much of that is up to you?
Right.
You know, how much of that is in your power? And I'm like, well, you know what? Part of accepting to carry a firearm is accepting that there is some of it in your power now. And like literally your local government's like, according to all we can find on you as a background, like you're fit to have this power. We're trusting you to make this decision when we're not around.
Right.
I don't know. I don't have a good answer. You know, I don't have a conclusive answer. I can't argue with you at all. But it's just like where I flux, you know?
I know. And it's weird too. It's like, because it could game out anyway too. Like to even be like,
you waste that guy and you ruin his family.
Right. Right. Or like,
he was the breadwinner.
Or like his story is to like find redemption.
Yeah.
And like, you know, whatever it might be. So like from a faith standpoint, his story is to be like Paul. Paul's a guy in the Bible who oversaw the killing of lots of Christians and then ended up becoming one himself and
being the GOAT.
Not revolutionizing, but carrying forward what we know today as modern Christianity in a lot of ways. So it's like, you know, that sort of stuff too. It's just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the right answer is.
Yeah. That's also why I got CCW insurance.
Yeah.
Literally got that stuff just for the sake of like, what if this dude's just cracked out and he's like he's like a hedge fund manager on Wall Street, and I waste him, and then his like family, who's trillionaires, wants to sue. CCW insurance cover my ass. All that said, it's easy to joke about. It's easy, like you said, it's easy to game it, make hypotheticals. At the end of the day, man, like I'm still just like, I really just don't think I'll know until I'm in that situation. And part of me thinks about like, what would some of these dudes that you and I like, we listen to for advice and stuff, do they be sitting at this table being like, no, man, that waste that sucker. Yeah. And I'm just like, I'm like, yeah, but maybe I disagree with this guy in that situation. You know, it's hard, man. It's so it's. I think it's easy to think there's like a one Band-Aid solution, and then you really get into it. Maybe it's not as hard for like people who don't have like a belief in a higher power and divine purpose for people. But I think for like you and I, it is a hard thing. It's a hard conversation to kind of walk yourself through. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if like the command is to take your shirt off your back, put it on your enemy, walk an extra mile with his stuff on your load, you know. And
I'll reap coals on his head for doing that.
Yeah.
He'll feel really bad at night about it.
And turn the other cheek and all these things, and it's like, dang. Yeah, because but at the same time, if good men stand by and do nothing, evil's gonna win out.
Yeah. And
like you're saying with like you know, whether it be a religious war or a religious warfare onto people through communism, whatever it might be, like lots of hurt and suffering came through because people weren't able to and didn't stand up for against those things.
That's why I find this is my like, as we're wrapping up here, this is my like plug. This is why I find the story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer so fascinating. If you don't know, go look him up. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote a lot of good books. A lot of books that are just like philosophically good, even if you're not a Christian. But Bonhoeffer was a German through and through, born and raised in Germany. By the time he just barely missed being of age to fight in World War I. And by the time World War II rolled around, he essentially was he was in America when Germany was essentially rising to power, and he was like, man, I gotta go back to Germany. I gotta make sure people fix their hearts and like do what I can to change this national movement and try to lead them back to Christ. And he did it. He was doing a good job, but it just like the government was waging war on these churches. And so his secret churches were just getting like totally just destroyed. And he just finally had enough one day, and he just decided like, I cannot in good conscience let this go on. And he had an opportunity to essentially help out with the assassinations of Hitler. The attempts, none of them saw fruition, and someone ratted him out, and he was executed in a concentration camp. And I see that, dude, and I think like a dude who was a wiser Christian than me also struggles with this and accepted perhaps this is wrong in the eyes of God, perhaps this is sin, but as far as I can tell, I don't have the ability to determine if it is or isn't.
Right.
But I can determine that I feel like I need to do this to stop this. And I feel like that's just kind of what it ends up being, even in the small circumstances, when we're not dealing with Hitler, when we're dealing with just everyday bad guys, people who want to hurt. All that said, check out Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Yeah.
Fascinating story, incredible literature. I think he's in the Tom Cruise movie about Operation whatever that movie was called. Valkyrie, yeah. I think he was in like his character, you know, someone played him in it. But yeah, we hope you've kind of enjoyed again another kind of barrage of topics, a little kind of scatter, but that's the way we do it here. We just simply start with one and mosey on into the tangents and let it ride. And Ken, you know, for those of you out there, you know, we do not mind if you're believer or not, Christian or not. We'd love to hear your opinion, your thoughts, morality of making choices like this in the heat of the moment, especially for like, I mean, you know, I would love to hear and listen and learn from someone who's actually been in a situation where they had to make a choice like this, and learn from you, learn from your life experience. But all that said, we appreciate you. Thanks for chiming in with us. We hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Till next time. Thanks for tuning in. If you love this episode, drop us a review. If you have qualms or comments, leave us a voicemail on our website. While you're there, check out our latest news, merch, and deals from our sponsors. Till next time, Ken.